Alzheimer's disease to aneurysms, chronic pain, eye disease, inflammation, and immunological problems. This kind of research now routinely makes headlines in mainstream media. Will the magic of psychedelics transform psychiatry? Asked The Guardian in November 2021. A year later, psychedelic drugs may launch a new era in psychiatric treatment, brain scientists say, according to NPR. And the implication was, with increasing confidence, they would. And with the buzz came more investment, more innovation. Wall Street backs new class of psychedelic drugs, reported the Wall Street Journal in February 2023. Venture capital funds have created multiple international startups such as Compass Pathways and Atai Life Sciences, who compete to develop and patent variants of psychedelic drugs and therapeutic protocols to sell to healthcare providers for widespread medical use. In the US alone, the projected value of the magic mushroom market in 2028 is $6.4 billion, which puts it on a par with that for baby food and nearly 10 times that of M&Ms. All of which is to say that in a few short years, psychedelics have gone from something you did at a festival to a place in the cultural mainstream. Being an expert in them had meant being a psychonaut, something of an outsider, of less than exalted reputation. Nowadays, it means being a research scientist, a therapist, an investor. What was for decades marginal has once again become of interest to the ordinary and extraordinary alike. In March 2023, Gabor Mate, the well-known physician and author specializing in trauma and addiction, interviewed and diagnosed Prince Harry on television, following the royal's astonishing, transformative experiences with a psychedelic tea. Like some of my younger, more progressive colleagues, I kept half an eye on these developments. It's territory that's familiar to me professionally as a clinical neuropsychologist, treating people with brain trauma, neurological conditions, and before that, mental illness and addiction. At the time, there was little in the way of personal interest. In my teens and 20s, I'd taken more than my fair share of drugs, including the occasional trip. It was a long time ago. The experiences were messy, more torturous than recreational, and I had no desire to revisit them. But in middle age, the things I'd replaced drugs with, mindfulness practices, for example, or an interest in personality change, my own included, and what you might call self-transcendent states, were the very things psychedelic medicines were now being associated with. And yet, impressive as some of the studies undoubtedly were, some of the claims being made for psychedelics made me increasingly uneasy. For a start, the science did not always seem especially robust. The best scientists were open about the fact that their findings were qualified or partial or preliminary. Less scrupulous ones brushed over the fact that their studies were based on small cohort sizes and had yet to be replicated. And often, I had the feeling that their attention was somehow in the wrong place. The resurgent interest in psychedelics has concentrated primarily on the brain, and more specifically on those areas of the brain currently in vogue. The brain has its fashions too, but very little on the actual experiences of the people taking the drugs. Or else those experiences are binned in broad, coarsely constructed categories like mystical experience that reflect the mindsets, the biases and/or preferences of the researchers themselves. I read reports about the sudden, dramatic and lasting treatment of mental illness, but my experience as a clinician has been that mental illness doesn't tend to respond like that. Clearly, there was and is something incredibly interesting and valuable to be understood scientifically, but also culturally. Like many, I suspect, I have friends or friends of friends who had tried psychedelics out of curiosity, but also as a way of addressing feelings of misery, anxiety, stuckness. But I also couldn't help noticing how interesting and valuable psychedelics were to investors and had questions about the kinds of investment being made and in whose interests. Fashion and science are often uneasy bedfellows. From my perspective, the outside that is, it seemed we had an unhealthy cocktail of rigorous expertise, which was perhaps not quite as rigorous or expert as it might seem, and hype for commercial.